Hello everyone, welcome back. This is the final broadcast for a while, so I hope that I cover everything that I haven't already covered. Main thing is that the website is up, and that is chronobreakv2.com. It's an instruction manual for a game that doesn't exist. So this is the part I wanted to focus on, because this is where you see all the movies that we made over the probably last year and a half or so. I'll check out when the first broadcast was, but all the videos are just now available to view in a themed collection. And there's essentially like 18 pages, and each one has about 20 to 40 videos. We'll say 30. So 18 times 30. I don't know, whatever that is. That's like 540 videos, something like that. Yeah, it's a website where you can just check out stuff that we've done on this TV show, known pretty much as Chrono Meditations. I'm going to go over the website here in a second, but for now, let's try and figure out which parties we have out there. So these guys are in 1020 or so. You got like the gross industrial background mixed with the forest. Here we go. We got our music now. As always, the music is by Flovey. And I sort of imagined this would be like the overworld music. Flovey, you totally nailed it with this jam. And if I were able to actually make this game a reality, I would use this song as the break overworld. Excuse me, the overworld theme. Because actually, at the beginning, I always imagined it was the Final Fantasy IX. But as soon as I heard this song that Flovey did, I thought, oh, that's definitely the one. Because it uses the Chrono Trigger sound font. So it's like kind of the same as the project. If you don't ever change anything, the DNA, if you break it down to its component parts rather and then reuse those, the DNA of the original will always be there. So this song is a great example of illustrating that point, how the theme of this project was just to always maintain the DNA of the original. Procedurally generated games are the future, in my opinion. And that's why what this game would be like kind of Final Fantasy 12 meets Tactics meets Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Turtles in Time, like a beat 'em up with Chrono Trigger basically being the top of all that. It's like, imagine sending out a bunch of parties, and pretty sure that I've recently done a semi-illustration of this, but you know, the fun thing, party building and map maintenance. You throw together a party, and due to the limitations of the first game, only 3 members were available. So in this one, we would say it's kind of like the same. You take parties of 3 out with you, depending on how many arbiters you have. But the crazy thing would be that if you go to the website, this is in the... If you press the top right portion of the page, it explains all that, how like the arbiters and everything are in there. It's meant to look broken. Then, if you click on this, you'll get the clean version, especially of the menu at the bottom. See how now there's like a background image, and before it was all messy. Now it's all cleaned up, but finally the biggest thing is if you do this. And this one is what shows how the actual page is designed. See, despite how complicated it looks, it's really just these buttons. Classic GeoCities 1990 image map style. So that is the point and the purpose of that button here. This thing. All right, so that's it. That one explains the website. Amazing. Oh yeah, but if you click on one of them, then you'll see, so it's a bunch of movies, so it takes a bit of time to load up. But then you got it, and this one is going to be the end of time after you finish like imagine an open world beat 'em up sort of strategy RPG that has a, the first time you play it, maybe an hour long, and then as you learn it, anywhere from 10 minutes to 30 minutes, depending on the leveling that you do, kind of a tutorial chapter. So anyway, you would end up at the end of that tutorial chapter here, and this is actually the only hidden page on the website. Prehistory. There just weren't enough buttons on the main menu. That's a long story. But anyway, this is sort of just explains what prehistory would be like. Just so you know, benefit of watching this stream is you know that the only secret page on the website is this one, 65 million BC. And the rest are easily found from the main page. But just do the first one and explain the game. So you click on this one. It's going to take you to the new game. And this explains like the intro chapter, like I mentioned. If you press select new game, we'll go to the courtroom start. And you play through the Fall of Guardia. And here's all the chapters, okay? Fall of Guardia, Endless Forest, Heart of Dorino. That could all take like 20 minutes to get through. Not long. Where Dragons Sleep. And then you see there's like 5 optional chapters that you could play through, but what you're mainly trying to do is get to chapter 6 here, which is what gets you into the main game, which would be the break. It's the overworld, and it's the true game. So the first 6 chapters on this are just a like a guide, and you could optionally do 5A, 5B, or 5C, and you'll see why in a minute. So here's chapter 1. It shows like the action, also visible on the main page of what happens during the Fall of Guardia when they get separated. She's back in time, meets up with Frog, but then he stays behind to protect him, and then get to Gaia's navel where they get recruited into Ayla's tribe. See, that's an element right there. I'd love to see the Chrono Trigger universe start getting involved with like elements. It'd be really cool to explore El Nido in the Middle Ages. So multi-party battles would be, at this stage, you only have one arbiter, which is Marl. So you can control 3 people max with her. But there would be a lot of other guests on the screen potentially. that are like on auto-quested status. So here you are at the end of time, and here's the three optional ones. 2 time zones hold 3 recruitable wielders of the Masamune. So the Vision Serpent is made of Dreamstone and really hard to beat, unless you have Dreamstone equipment. So if you could get 1, 2, or even 3 copies of the Masamune, then that would be very sweet and helping to break through story gate number 1 and get to the main game, which is the break. Here we've got a good example of the learning mechanic in the game. Obviously, you know, Marl knew High Potion and Ether from her first adventure, but in the tutorial chapter, this is actually chapter 2 of, you know, the overall tutorial, you get a feeling for how skill transfer works. Similar to like Final Fantasy Tactics in a way, but not exactly the same. And she comes with the pendant, which gives you like, it takes this throwaway comment from Chrono Cross and makes it more relevant to this potential final third game, where you actually use the pendant to mitigate the difficulty. Playing with time already. Also very similar to the mechanic in the game Braid that came out way back in the day. Okay, let's move on to the next one. This explains... So there's standard arbiters being these guys. And then there's Ayla, who's not an arbiter. These would be like the 5 starting scenarios that you can start every game on. And there you would pick up... They all have like their own convergence to the Marl storyline that you would be on when you play through the first time. Or you can just redo hers like this. In New Game Plus, characters keep their power levels, but not their equipment. That is unless you stow it in one of those Zillion chests. And then would transfer across from attempt to attempt. At any time, you can restart it. And you'll start at the campfire in 700 before Ayla meets up with Nadia and Robo from her scenario. And so here it talks about the Arbiter. You can take parties of 3. And it represents how Lavos is at the core. Like, your whole point in playing the game is to better something. And that's essentially the result of Lavos being on the planet. And it kind of ends up being like a pruning of the Lavos spawn throughout the map. I don't know. It's not a real game, so I don't know how it actually ends up, but that's all floating around in there. Oh, here we go. Why are arbiters important? So here you have 3 arbiters, Shala, Kid, and Nadia. And so they can spread out across the map. And in this scenario, Shala's party calls for a rescue and Kid comes over. So with no Arbiter mode unlocked, you would finally get a chance to do as many parties as you wanted, no limitations. And the way you get to no Arbiter mode is by destroying the Frozen Flame, which then disables New Game Plus. So essentially you've got all these choices you can make to affect your game. And this is an example of how certain conditions being met would lead to story lore, side quests that happen automatically. For instance, let's say that Robo is the last person alive in your party. If Robo's last, go to a K-Pal analog, and then you'll get this conditional scenario that opens up where these creepy versions of Luca and Magish arrive from a red gate to recruit him into it. And that's the Omega Flare trio, so who knows what they're going to do after that. But it would be like, imagine a game where if Robo's your last character, you suddenly get a last-ditch boss attempt at the last boss with 2 OP guests / they're under your control now, because that's just like how the story would go. Then you can see that the third one is combat, and we've covered all this before, showing how the spells, you keep fire, you keep lightning, you never get beyond that spell, but it gets really big with your level. So here she's casting a 99 aura, and it's actually going to the overworld style map to show the coverage. Level 30, level 40, then level 99. This way you can really just get to know your spells and love them, instead of ditching fire for fire 2 later on. And that would allow for critical casts if, a level 30 actually came out with a level 90 appearance and power, which would be a massive jump if you went from 30 to 90. But I feel like a critical spell would be more like a level 30 hits, but the level 40 version of it comes out. Once a spell reaches a certain level, it may gain new properties, like a larger area of coverage, status effects, or you can manipulate the environment. This is one of the most important things. Essentially, this game would be a combat simulator. All we want is the massively cool combat engine from Chrono Trigger, but with a bunch of party members that can sync up in crazy ways, and our OG characters built up beyond what they appeared before. And Cyrus has got this passive ability that allows him to spot where enemies get angry at you and stop you to fight. So if you have Cyrus in your party, and anyone that he's taught this skill to, yeah, you can simply, go through the enemies. Some elements of these heavy, strong choices that affect your entire run that you can't change back were present, like even in the original Chrono Trigger. Here, if you say the incorrect thing to Magus at the scene, then he'll just not join your party, which is a massive change in your trajectory based on one conversation. So that kind of thing carries over into this game with the theme of, loss and hard choices. And that's why the made to be replayed, roguelike, procedurally generated style is maximized here, because you could have a game that takes 2 or 5 hours, or you could have a game that you've harnessed and built up forever, that you've played for, traditional RPG like 60, 80 hours, and you just have tricked out so many different things. Auto-quested characters use a simplified version of Final Fantasy XII's Gambit system. Oh, here's one I really think would be unique. If you have dynamic character growth, they use it or lose it. So if you have a bunch of characters who you don't send out on raiding parties hanging around the base, then they'll actually slowly level down. And that would keep it fresh too. So, you know, someone could stay at the homestead for an entire season, and then when they come back out, they're a little bit rusty, so you can build them up with whomever. Just stuff like that. Ebb and flow or whatever. The natural state of the environment affects characters based on their innate elements. If it's raining, water types have an advantage. Dark innates have an advantage at night. Set the forest ablaze to increase fire damage. Be careful not to hurt the non-combative animals. So in a whole ecosystem with like sort of a simplified farming habitat maintenance mechanic in the endgame, Chrono Break is meant to be played over and over. Start with Princess Marl and unlock 5 different starting scenarios to tell new variations of the classic tale. After you join Ayla and her tribe, reset the game at any time with the prehistoric ancestral elements. Then we can really focus in on, you know, the trial was another first example of what we would call invisible point counts that decide character synergy and junk like that. In Radical Dreamers, Surge's health is tracked by an invisible point count restored by various events such as finding a potion. The game also tracks Kid's affection for Surge, influenced by battles and scripted events. Her feelings determine whether he survives. Let's lean into that. There's never a point counter, but team synergies and whatnot are built by teammates who fight together will build invisible synergy and stronger techs. Spacing techs. Ryan Beardy, his Chrono Trigger video really influenced that idea. This is Robo's page. This shows the art style. This is not 2.5D, but you could imagine. Frenetic, fast-paced. In this scenario, you have 4 people on screen, so if that's one Arbiter, then you would have one auto-quested fighter running around with them. For this one, I took some old Chrono Trigger footage and just erased the fade in and fade out load times that the Super Nintendo required. And so you can see that in a modern day experience, the gameplay would just be so much snappier, even if you simply copied the original Chrono Trigger gameplay and just removed the load times, which I assume we could do with, you know, the strength of modern day machines processing what's essentially 16-bit maps. Here it is again. You can see on this side, it just goes so much faster on the left side. Seeing Daniel Oliver's artwork back at the beginning of this project was so inspiring and cool. It's like we have to make something like this happen. And then of course, Nama, who did the amazing fight with Magus way back in the day and now just recently came out with another one showcasing all of this. So this can't be that hard to do in the modern day. You rip down all the Chrono Trigger assets and rearrange it with dynamic camera angles and some of this. The last one I wanted to do was the Kid Radical Dreamers one. So one thing about Kid's story is that, let's check down here first. Sometime after Chrono Cross in the future, 1030 AD, which is the furthest we've seen, the present timeline go, that's when Kid has to go back and rescue Surge. So this scene is, a pivotal part of the plot that we've never seen. So all of this stuff would be how I imagine the Kid Gil start, which is actually Magus after he became Guile, but we're going to revert Guile to Gil because that was like his Radical Dreamer's name, and it just sounds cool. Anyway, after Chrono Cross, the Black Dragon was dead, and the demi-humans thought the Black Dragon was their god. So the demi-humans, very upset, basically declared war on the humans. And so the last decade, from 1020 Chrono Cross time to 1030, has seen the world set on fire by the demi-humans coming after humans. So this is where you have Magus and Kid, who are in a paired, they're a paired unit. So imagine that, bonding units is a thing. So in this case, Kid and Magus, I imagine Kid and Gil would be bonded units until you side quest one of them, and then you can separate them again if you want. But like Migo and Gigi never come on bonded. The bonding thing I think would be really sweet, because then you can, not only can you start to mix up your playing with, 3 parties, 3 units being controlled by a single party, and start mixing and matching and getting more out of that system, but also just for plot purposes, bonding is cool. Especially if you're playing through the game a bunch of times. Yeah, would Darksaber be a triple tech? Because it's so much more stronger than the other sabers? Who knows? At the end of Chrono Cross, the demi-humans became hostile as they viewed the humans have killing their god. So there's a lot more on the website, and I encourage you to, if you're interested in this project, to go take a look at it. I think we covered 4 out of the 18 pages, and the rest are all themed to kind of guide through, the plot points as they become relevant to the presentation. But if you'd like to see this one day, I know a couple people are interested in adapting it to tabletop, so if you're one of those people who wants to do a tabletop version, here's your blueprint, and it's been a pleasure. I'll be in touch, but thank you for following along during this journey. It's been fantastic.